Hey everyone, Seth here. Quick reminder, if you want to contact us with a question or comment or whatever, there are a couple ways you can do so. Either you can go to our email at more.layers.podcast@gmail.com, or you can go to YouTube, use the comment section below the videos, or a direct YouTube message is another way you can do that. And just feel free to give us any questions, comments, podcast topic suggestions, whatever, shout out, whatever, and we'll try to get back. Hello, everyone. Welcome again to More Layers. I'm Seth Mariano.
And I'm Jordan Smith, and this is our first episode of April 2024. And I believe this will be the one episode we have before the eclipse that is taking place over where we are.
That's right. Coming Monday is the widely buzzed about eclipse of the sun, and uh, probably some of you are probably getting that day off. Maybe I'll take some time to maybe do a little something special. Maybe go and get a picture or whatever of the totality, whatever. Just if you get the chance, enjoy that day, and I'm sure we all will try.
Oh, for sure. It's around here, at least, a somewhat rare occurrence. I don't think I've ever experienced it before, but I know various businesses and schools are approaching the eclipse differently. Some locations are taking the day off completely. Uh, but like Wegmans, for example, I know they are closing for about 30 or so minutes during the projected time of the eclipse itself. So I guess when they close, everybody steps outside, watches the sun, and then when the eclipse is done, then they go back inside. I'm not sure how that works, but of course, there's still the essential jobs out there. So unfortunately, there are going to be some people who miss it, but I'm sure there's going to be plenty of photos, plenty of videos taken. I'm sure there's going to be time lapses made to show just how dark it gets during that time.
Yeah, well, whatever you do, just have fun and yeah, it should be pretty good.
I think so. And just got to make the most of it.
Yeah. So the more I think about it, in the last few years, we've been living in a very interesting time, unlike any other era past, where we've seen more of a spotlight shown on mental health and mental illness and abuse in the entertainment industry that has never really gotten spotlight exposure like this before. I guess it kind of came to an explosion with like the Weinstein scandal a few years ago, but now
Mm.
it's kind of really revved up with stuff like the Quiet on Set docuseries and Jeanette McCurdy coming out with her story, and Britney Spears just released her memoir, which we'll probably get into a little bit later. But yeah, so that's kind of our focus for the next few minutes. All of that crap that's been going on and being exposed.
Right. The biggest thing to take from stuff like this, other than how important a person's mental health can be, uh, is like with anything else, whether it be a TV show, a movie, a stage production, or any sort of form of entertainment, just like what you see on camera or on stage is not necessarily a perfect depiction of what's going on behind the scenes. And there
No,
have been plenty of people talking or publishing things that kind of encapsulate that idea. And of course, one of the more well-known ones right now is the currently running docuseries Quiet on Set, which covers a few child actors' experiences working on shows that aired on Nickelodeon when they were much younger, and some of the darker, more twisted stuff going on that we never see. And like we obviously can't get too explicit because it does get explicit. I don't know all the details. I'm not sure I want to right now because people have been telling me kind of approximately how explicit it gets. But we also do want to encourage people to check this stuff out if they feel inclined or interested, because we don't want to spoil everything either. Um, but a popular name, and not in a good way, that has been brought up from the Quiet on Set docuseries is, I think his name is Dan Schneider.
Yeah.
Uh, he's worked on shows like iCarly, Drake and Josh. I think he worked on Victorious. And he said and did some things that were not all that pleasant. And of course, when accusations are made, typically you want to have evidence or proof of these claims. Otherwise, things can take a terrible turn in a different way. But evidence has been brought forth. And this has been going on for years now that I think about it, because I remember Nickelodeon cut ties with him back in, I want to say it was either 2018 or 2019. Um, but there have been videos that have surfaced. I don't know if they're part of the docuseries or not, but it would have him behind the camera filming these kids, saying some really awkward stuff to them, or doing some awkward things to them. And so many people have shown how uncomfortable he had made them, or how he has them doing some weird stuff both on and off camera, and how it really messed with their childhood while they were growing up in the entertainment industry.
Yeah, there has been some, well, maybe difficult maybe for some people to believe, for those who are maybe on that fence, aren't sure what to believe about this, if you do, I'm convinced enough even without it, but if you do want to confirm, then maybe go research those if you can, and then maybe that'll tell you. Yeah, it's like I know, like when the Weinstein scandal came out, there was some rare video and audio to kind of confirm some of the claims that were being made. So that probably helped a little bit with the verdict. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm definitely a believer in due process, and even our mutual friend, who is a sci-fi writer, would strongly advocate for that. And even, yeah, and because especially nowadays in this sort of woke and cancel culture we live in, due process is pretty much neglected. It's not really factored in as much as it should be. So I'm
Right.
definitely a big believer in, due process over making decisions based purely on emotion. But I mean, I don't have enough evidence. I mean, but I do, but I do totally buy what's being said, though. I'll say that.
Right. And, the popular phrase, which is very much true, is innocent until proven guilty. Uh, and now I do think Dan Schneider is guilty because I have seen some clips of him doing some weird stuff. Like I think there was a clip that surfaced on social media where some of the iCarly cast were sitting on a couch, and I think he was standing behind, I want to say it was Miranda Cosgrove, and he started like putting his arms around her in a weird way. Uh, or
That's
like he
kind of
would,
interesting because you know how in McCurdy's memoir, you know, well, I don't know if she said that in the book. I know it was implied somewhere in the news that Cosgrove had no idea, yeah, how McCurdy was being treated, so she didn't suspect anything. But then, ironically, Lee, she's being questionably touched, like you're saying, by Schneider, which makes it kind of weird.
well, I don't know if there was any actual physical contact in the clip itself, but it looked like he was going to. Um, and some people might end up saying, "Oh, Maconda, I cannot speak. Miranda Cosgrove is a liar," but it's hard to say she is, at least on my end, because I haven't seen any actual instances from what I can tell of him directly doing things with her. There are photos of him hugging her. I can't tell what she's thinking in those photos. I'm not a mind reader.
Depends on.
Um, the other
Excuse me.
thing too to keep in mind is even when something like that happens, a lot of people, whether it's these actors or not, when something like that happens to them, they don't want to speak up for reasons of, say, fear or embarrassment or something along that line. And that
And it
could
could be
be,
for a number of reasons, like
oh,
they they're afraid it might lead to professional repercussions, like jeopardized careers, or they feel like they've got to keep up their career, to just take take whatever flack they get so they can please their parents who kind of push them in, kind of like
mhm.
the situation with McCurdy. But yeah, it could be a number of reasons. But speaking up even when you're uncomfortable is not always the easiest thing.
Oh yeah, that's why a lot of people, when they do speak up, people respond by telling them that they are a brave person, because it really does oftentimes take a lot of guts to speak to the public about a private instance that happened behind the scenes that people would have otherwise never even known about. Because yeah, there are sometimes people that will respond by saying, "Oh, if this was a problem, you should have said something sooner," or something to that effect. Um, one thing I will say, I don't know if this was discussed in the Quiet on Set docuseries or not, but after it did start premiering, everybody pointed out that there was one shining beacon, at least on the iCarly set, during the time of its run, that being Jerry Trainer. Those who don't know who he is the guy who played Spencer, iCarly's older brother on the show of the same name. Uh, and according to multiple sources and photos and videos that have surfaced, he would constantly check in on the other actors. And if he saw someone like Dan Schneider getting a little too close or a little too handsy or saying things he shouldn't, he would be the one guy to stand up for everybody else. Like there's one particular video that surfaced where Dan Schneider was getting a little too close to one of the iCarly actors, and Jerry Trainer, while trying to stay professional, he also kind of jumped backwards into Dan Schneider a little bit to push him back away from the kids. Um, there was a video that also surfaced where Dan Schneider was behind the camera. He was pointing it at the actor who plays Freddy. I forget his name.
Nathan Kress.
Yes. He was filming him, and Dan Schneider said something like called him cute or whatever in a really creepy way. And Jerry Trainer, who was sitting right next to him, basically said, "Ew, don't say that." Um, so he called the guy out. He would stop him from doing things many times while also trying to stay professional. He was risking his career every time he did that because Dan Schneider was in a much higher position than he was. So he could have just been like, you know what, you're out of here. A lot of times Jerry Trainer was these kids' last line of defense between them and Schneider.
Yeah, trying to imagine why Schneider would not fire him over that. Maybe because he was a key comic relief to the episodes, and probably figured, if he goes, there goes our bottom line. I feel like is often the motivation. It's greed. I could be wrong. Maybe not 100% of the time, but more often than not, I think it's got something to do with greed.
Well, I wouldn't be too surprised if that were the case because I haven't seen too much of iCarly, but I know that Spencer is one of the main characters. He's probably one of the main sources of comic relief. Um, so removing him would remove a big chunk of the show because he's also related to Carly. So everyone would be like, where the heck did he go? How are you going to write this character off out of nowhere? And that could cause viewership to go down. And as a result, they would make less money.
Well,
So Schneider may have backed himself into a corner in more ways than one by behaving the way he did. And Jerry Trainer, even though he hasn't had too much work as of late, from what I understand, uh, he's being hailed, especially recently, as a hero. He was one of the few shining beacons in a dark situation.
yeah.
Though, speaking of iCarly, after years of absence, they actually brought the show back. But many people might have noticed that there was one key character missing. That being Sam, played by Jeanette McCurdy.
And for good reason, yeah. And she's written a whole book, of course, a bestseller from what I know. I'm glad my mom died, kind of chronicling even her upbringing before fame and how dramatic that was, and even describing in a lot of details. And I haven't read the book. I mean, I've read excerpts of it, but I've seen like an interview here and there. She talks about some of the details that are covered, being physically invaded by her mom, being forced to act when she didn't really like have a genuine interest in it on her own terms, and how stuff like that and other stuff led her to like serious mental problems,
Mhm.
struggles with alcohol, body image, eating disorders, and 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 she doesn't shy away from it seemingly at all. How dark and manipulative and exploitative and greedy that like showmakers and even loosely speaking stage parents like her mom can be.
Oh, for sure. And it goes hand in hand with what can happen when a child actor gets too famous too quickly. Because we've seen some childhood actors who are really good, but then the fame gets to them willingly or not, and then they start making not so good decisions or other things happen that are not too good for them. Uh, because at that age they don't know how to handle it. But I while I don't have a copy of the book myself either, um, some summaries I looked into in my research were saying a lot of what you said, where she was basically kind of forced into the acting industry by her mom. And basically, from that point forward, she was living a life up to the point where her mom passed, where she felt that her purpose was to make her mom happy. Like she just was doing whatever her mom wanted to do, either because she wanted to make her happy or because she felt like she had no choice. I'm not entirely sure. But after a while, her mom got cancer and she eventually passed away. Jeanette McCurdy, I know at some point she based on my research, again, I haven't read the actual book, so bear with me here. Um, she apparently was drinking. She started eating a lot more. Uh, like generally speaking, she wasn't really being healthy, both physically and mentally. And then eventually, everything happened on Nickelodeon. I don't know how much of that she writes about in her book, but whether or not she did, she was more than likely involved in some case because she was also a big part of shows like iCarly or Sam and Cat.
And I've thought about this. This is not the first time that an actor, especially a prestigious one, has been through this kind of Hollywood machine crap. Like, this is probably that's probably a situation story like pretty much as old as the business has been around. Like I thought of I briefly touched on this like in the show's past here on More Layers of Judy Garland,
Mhm.
who was kind of pushed by her mom to keep at this career where and forced to and take drugs to get her energy up for shoots and then to sleep at night and then ironically only because she was taking so many drugs she lost jobs on multiple projects. Well, which is like, well, what do you want,
Yeah.
and then and, and she even said, and this is probably the most heartbreaking quote you could hear, said she once said, "The only time I felt wanted was when I was performing," if I remember correctly.
Wow. I mean, I've never read about her saying that, but if that's the case, that is really tough.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you want generally people would want to make other people happy. I certainly do. I like to make people smile. I like to make people laugh. Um, but if that was the only way I could make myself happy, I would probably be concerned. And I think some of the stuff you were describing with her, I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily identical, but I feel like Lindsay Lohan went through some similar issues. Like she was, how do I word this? I don't know if she was taking drugs per se, but I think she was making some questionable choices, and a lot of people were upset with her. But then after some time, from what I understand, it came out that her parents were not the greatest influence on her either. So how much of it can you really pin on her?
Yeah. Yeah. And even that, kind of connects to like I kind of briefly hinted that we might cover this, like Britney Spears coming out with her own life story that's never really been told in this sort of amount of detail before with her new memoir, The Woman in Me, which I haven't read either. I've seen excerpts of it on the internet and stuff, but and I've seen like certain like Watch Mojo lists pertaining to some of the material in it,
Hmm.
and and it's enough to make you think, or someone like me anyway, think, oh, man, we have misjudged this lady for so many years, and there has been so much that no one has acknowledged, or no one has really, uh, no that no one has really that nobody has really acknowledged, and so much that has been wrongfully blamed on her. I mean, yeah, she's responsible at the end of the day for her own actions, but at the same time, I'm like, you look at the stuff she dealt with the press, and I'll put a link to one of the videos that I mentioned, and the stuff, her relationship troubles, and even the stuff that she dealt with before fame, growing up, the abuse that ran in her family. I'm like, you learn about all of that, and you think, like, oh, man, it's been like torture all her life.
Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of celebrities, we only know as much about them as the media will show or as the internet can get their hands on. Uh, but what instances like this show is that you can't really take things at face value all the time because it's not always how it looks. Like, yes, some of that is there, but until we understand why, we might be missing some major context, which can flip the situation around entirely.
Yeah.
Like I know, I forget exactly when this was happening, but for a little while there was that hashtag going around, hashtag Free Britney.
Yeah.
Um, and for those that are not aware of what that is, from what I understand, I guess her father basically had control over everything pertaining to her career.
And
And
some aspects of her personal life, possibly too.
yeah, probably. So people were saying Free Britney because they wanted her to have control over her life, over her career. And eventually that did happen. And the internet celebrated because she was finally released. She finally had full control over what she was able to do. Because she, from what we can tell, did not have that growing up.
Yeah, I think like back in like you might say the days of her rise. Nobody was talking about stuff like that. I don't think nobody was acknowledging. I know these people got problems. They got some crap going on in the family or whatever stuff. But the more I think about her story, I feel like that's something in a way that every one of us can relate to. Maybe not to that dramatic extent, all of us, but I think we've all spent a lot of time trying to cope with baggage and probably oftentimes looking for comfort and relief or escape or whatever in not the best places. And I feel like in this case, Brittany just didn't know what else to do with herself or how to deal with her feelings or whatever crap she had to go through. And now somehow she found the strength, found the courage to tell her side of the story, and it makes you really put everything in maybe a more accurate perspective and really feel like this and acknowledge this isn't necessarily some egomaniacal monster that the world has made her out to be. This is like a real hurting person with boundaries and emotional limits and someone who has been dealt, you could probably say, a dehumanizing hand all through life.
I would definitely say so. And I do remember one thing from when she was much younger, because there was a viral video that surfaced after she had shaved her head completely and she was going after somebody's car or something. And I remember vaguely there were people that were saying things like, "Holy cow, she's nuts, she's crazy, she's certifiably insane," or something along that line. But now with this new information that we have, it can really paint a different picture. Even though we've seen videos like that for years, it could just be, and this is just assumption here, it could just be that she wanted to respond in a healthy way, but she didn't know how because nobody ever showed her.
Yeah, and I think she even said in an excerpt that I saw or heard uh, that the big reason she shaved her hair off uh, was her way of coping with image pressure.
Okay,
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah, and she was probably getting stressed out and overwhelmed by that. I think that she didn't know what else to do or something.
That could very well be the case because the media alone can make a big stink over anybody when they change their appearance at all. Like some people, if someone gains or loses weight, they'll have a hissy fit over it. Or if somebody changes their hairstyle or something along that line, people can get upset over these smallest things. So if she wanted to change her appearance because people were already doing that, that can be harsh.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
what
Well,
she did, but how people would respond.
yeah. Well, I do sincerely hope that stories like hers and all the rest of the ones that we've talked about or brought up that they will help lead us in the right direction, lead to lasting change in the industry. I mean, I feel like it's too soon as it is right now to really trust Hollywood. I think, well, maybe partly because it's really amoral or valueless, and because it's so focused on bottom line commercial gain that really the really morality and basic human decency are kind of kicked to the curb. So I feel like as it is, I don't know if I could still ever for my whole life trust the business, but I do either way want to see mm, mm, these kind of stories, I guess, lead to continuous positive change, and there will be and and performers and whoever is working even behind the scenes. And this has happened to some writers, and that's covered in Quiet on the Set as well.
Right.
That they will be they will have better care, better access to counseling or whatever they need to navigate the pressures or whatever the business or their career throws at them in a healthy way,
Yep.
and the hopefully will learn to be more compassionate and less judgmental, and
Okay.
feel like stories like these are really helping us kind of at least get started.
Yeah, and as an aspiring film and voice actor myself, I will eventually be working in that industry. And I've been saying to people recently, after watching, for example, the videos of Jerry Trainer, it's like, that's the kind of guy I want to be. Because God forbid, should that happen again, I want to be there for other people who feel uncomfortable and speak on their behalf if I have to, or come to their defense if I have to. Because, like, if there's going to be some dark or bad people in Hollywood, and there's probably always going to be, unfortunately, because the industry is so vast, you're bound to find at least one or two. I want to be one of the people that will stand against them for the sake of my fellow actors or writers or whoever is on the receiving end of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. If a friend or a family member or even a hypothetical future kid of mine or something does consider going into the business and acting or even working behind the scenes, I would probably consider advising them, you know, be careful, take care of yourself, and understand that it's a very commercial environment. It's about money, and and oftentimes they're going to be looking out for number one because of that. They're not going to do stuff probably a lot of the time that's in your best interest. So know what you're getting into. You know the terms, know the power that they have, and you know make your choices carefully.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, um, yeah, I think that that's good enough to cover that. If we could maybe just move on to our curious question for today, and the one this time is musicals that may never be done by Artists Unlimited. For those who don't know, that's the theater group we participate in, Jordan and myself.
Hmm.
Musicals that they may never do that you like.
Yeah, this was definitely an interesting topic to tackle because I've talked with multiple people before about shows that I would love to do with the group, but I also recognize that there may be reasons why we can't. Because in a group like this, they wouldn't necessarily be able to handle well some of the darker or more serious moments in some of these shows, which I completely understand. I'm happy to do the shows that we do, and I understand why there may be shows that we can't do. Uh, but there are some shows that I do like that I recognize Artists Unlimited will probably never do. And the first one that immediately came to my mind when we decided to discuss this topic is Phantom of the Opera. It's honestly one of my favorite productions on stage in general. I just love the story. I love the music from beginning to end. I don't get bored. I love watching it. And it was a wonderful experience when my parents took me to see the stage version because up until that point, I think the only version of Phantom I'd ever seen was the 2000s movie with Gerard Butler. Excuse me, Gerard Butler. Um, yeah, I certainly loved it, but I do recognize that it has some darker elements in there. Like some people are being choked, or there's some gunshots, there's sword fights, there's fire in some cases. And of course, the way the Phantom looks can be kind of scary without the mask on, even though the story kind of tells you that just because they look one way doesn't mean they act that way. Um, it's a rough story for the more sensitive people out there. And because Artists Unlimited generally sticks to family friendly shows, I don't see them doing this one.
Yeah, that was also on my list. Yeah, and I fondly remember seeing it. I wasn't in it, but my senior year of high school, when our school did it, I think we were probably like maybe the first high school to put on a production of it back in 2011. And I don't know. I I kind of dug it the first time, and yeah, I think there's a good theme about this outcast who's kind of looking for attention or whatever, and some very well composed music and good story writing, kind of like you said. And I suppose if by some hypothetical we did and get the chance to do it, I would be all in, I think, but it probably
Uh,
won't happen.
Probably not, but if for some unexpected reason they did do it, I would be more than excited.
Yeah.
And then I thought of a production that I do see done by even middle schoolers, some high schoolers, and what have you. And it's even a Disney production, but I don't think Artists Unlimited would ever do The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Mm.
That's another one that I like in terms of like the story and definitely the music. Uh, but there are some really dark elements, particularly for a Disney production, that make its way into this story. Like the whole thing with Frollo and his interest in Esmeralda. I don't think this cast could ever really portray that in a family friendly setting. Um, and of course, Paris burning up in flames. That might be too dark for some people, but I think on par with the whole thing with Frollo, a big reason why I don't think Artists Unlimited would do Hunchback as much as I would like to is because one of the major plot points of the story is how people are disgusted by Quasimodo at first just by the sight of him. Like they'll like have shock or fear, like they'll back away if he gets too close. And even one of our mutual friends, as much as he loves the show, as much as he loves Hunchback, the one scene that he just can't bring himself to watch is when Quasimodo is like all roped up and people are throwing stuff at him. And he's a tough guy, but even struggles with that scene sometimes. So I feel like scenes like that, or pretty much anything with Frollo, would be a little too much.
Mm, yeah, probably.
Right. And then I thought of this next one because I was actually almost in this one about 4 years ago now.
Ah,
Uh,
Fiddler on the Roof, I'm guessing.
yeah, it definitely was Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah, I
Uh,
bought a ticket for it. Yeah, and then they canceled it, and
yeah, that's the big thing that sucked about it. Um, it was done at a high school, and of course, I'm older than the average high schooler, so people might wonder, why am I part of this cast? Well, there were two reasons for that. One being I used to attend that school, and the person directing it is also who directs the Artists Unlimited shows. So, yeah, we were doing Fiddler on the Roof. We got very far along, and I was given the honor to be one of the guys in the wedding who does the dance with the bottles being balanced on their heads. And it wasn't even strapped to anything. Like, we actually were balancing these things, and it was difficult at first, but eventually we got the hang of it. We were doing really well. And of course, everybody knows what happened in 2020. And as a result, like Seth said, the show got canceled. Uh, so I would very much like to do the show at some point, especially since I know my parents have been a fan of it. And I know my mom has told me before she wants to see me in a production of that at some point. But I don't think it would be through artists because, like with these other ones, it can get dark. There are definitely a few good songs in there that I could see the cast doing. There are some funny moments in there that we could get the audience to laugh at. But like the whole plot point of everyone in the main cast basically being kicked out of where they live, and the fact that it doesn't really end on the happiest of notes, that's a big punch right there that would be tough for some of our cast to handle. Um, but I think one that also might be a little difficult in terms of elements of the show is the whole sequence where Tevir claims he had a dream that heavily involved one of his dead relatives. Now, Artists Unlimited, I feel like maybe if they really wanted to, could work their way around it so it's not as creepy. But that scene, especially in the film adaptation, can definitely be a bit creepy because, when they start singing about her, her hand is coming up out of the ground and then she floats like a ghost, has this really creepy laugh, and it ends with her standing over a grave that Tevir and Golder fall into. It's like that scene alone, I feel like would be tough to do. Maybe they could work around it somehow, but generally speaking, it's not the easiest of shows to do.
but I got a good feeling that people would pay a lot of good money to see you balance a bottle on your head.
It definitely would be fun to do again. I honestly miss doing that.
Yeah, and he can
Uh,
juggle too. You ever get to see him juggle?
well, I'm not the greatest of jugglers. I'm one of those people that can juggle like three little balls at a time or something.
Well, not bad, not
Um,
bad. Even that's hard.
oh, it definitely can be when you don't have the practice or hand-eye coordination. Uh, but I often compare myself to the people who can juggle four or five plus at a time. I see people who can juggle balls and while they're juggling them, use them to play a piano at the same time. It's like, I don't know what kind of coordination you need for that, but I'm nowhere near that level. But I do like to juggle in the ways I'm able to, at least. And if people are fascinated by it, cool. But then, yeah, there was Fiddler, there was
Phantom.
Hunchback, there was Phantom. Um, Another one I would say, because I know this is a popular one,
Hmm.
but if you want dark shows, Les Miserables.
Mm, yeah.
That is a popular one. I see many of my friends talking about it every so often and how they would love to do it or have done it before. Uh, or they've seen it on stage before and they absolutely love it. But whether you've seen it on stage or you've seen the film adaptation, you know it can get beyond serious at times. Like there's people who die for one reason or another. There's one or two female characters that kind of sell themselves in order to help someone in their family.
Like
Um,
prostitution.
yeah, I wasn't sure whether or not to say that. It's kind of a weird word for me, but I know I won't give too many spoilers for those who still want to see it that haven't. But there is a character who, by the end of the story, kills themselves.
Hmm.
That alone, I don't think we could do. Granted, we could just make it so they vanish, disappear, walk away. But the people who know the story already, they would know what the implication was, and that would still be very dark. And I'm sure if there are people in the audience that would be in the know, they might have some issues or complaints about it.
Yeah, it's a bit, I guess, for lack of a better adjective anyway, touchy. Like
Yeah.
I guess like there was the whole controversy. I don't remember whether exactly it was about themes of suicide or something else, but there was the whole controversy surrounding Netflix's 13 Reasons Why. I think it might have had to do with suicide. Don't remember for certain, but yeah, so I don't think I should be surprised.
Right. It's definitely a dark and sad element that I know Artists Unlimited would never do that. They might be able to work it so that the character does something else, but there could be people who have issues with it, and we probably wouldn't want to take that risk. But those are the ones that I listed. I'm
Yeah.
sure you have your own.
Yeah, I have a few. The first one is one that I never really watched in any form, stage or screen, until recently because some of our mutual friends who are in Artists Unlimited with us were performing it on stage. Little Shop of Horrors.
That is definitely a classic. And for people who might not recognize that one by name,
Yeah,
just remember that's the one with the singing plant.
yeah, The Venus Flytrap. Audrey too.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was good. I got to well, meet one of the actors when they came to one of our performances of Mary Poppins and Artists Unlimited in the fall.
Hmm.
It was around the same time that they were doing this show, Little Shop of Horrors, and you know, I well, kind of like the whole cautionary tale theme that I see underlying the sort of like the hunger for prestige or power or fame or notoriety that kind of runs throughout, you know, and then yeah, and the songs are pretty good, and yeah, it's probably one of my favorite musicals right now, ever since I saw it this past fall. So
Yeah, I don't think I've ever actually seen the whole thing. I know I've seen clips of the film, and every once in a while, if somebody I knew was doing the stage version, they might post a snapshot of what their plant prop looks like, particularly when it's smaller. But yeah, I still have yet to see it. So if it shows up in the local area, I might actually go take a look.
yeah, I think it might be worth a look.
Sure.
Yeah, and and the one probably more famous, Greece.
Hmm.
Excuse me. um, yeah, Greece, which recently was performed at my high school back around Super Bowl time. I saw it on Super Bowl Sunday. Yeah, and I've seen it a couple times before that, and there are some. It's an interesting sort of 1950s time capsule, kind of a look back at a time time when things were so culturally different and so and 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 adolescence, I guess, was kind of being looked at slowly a little bit differently in America. And it tackles themes of, like, you could say self-discovery and living up to expectations that are pretty relevant even to today,
Hmm.
even though a lot has changed since then. And yeah, and there are some fun musical moments and some sweet character arcs you see throughout. And I don't know. I would be, hypothetically, if we were to do it, I'd be open to it.
Now, what would you say would be the reasons Artists Unlimited wouldn't do it?
Hmm. Yeah, good question. Well, probably, some of the maybe sexually suggestive, in a subtle way, sort of subject matter that's in it.
Yeah,
Because,
I definitely would agree on that.
yeah, I
Um,
mean,
yeah,
but I
go ahead.
think schools have done a more or less good job of toning it down and making it safe. But
Okay,
I don't know. What do you have to say?
I mean, if there is a way to tone it down, then it could be possible for Artists Unlimited to do it at some point. I just remember seeing a production of it, and if it's the one I'm thinking of, then there were definitely some sexual implications or actions that were at least hinted at. There weren't too many graphic things, but I think it was the production of Grease I saw where there was a guy singing about a blue moon, and he actually moons the audience, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that. I know the song you're thinking of. Yeah, they did use that in that last performance I saw, but it wasn't like that visually graphic, I don't think.
Right. And even if Artists Unlimited does find a way to do this production at some point, I can 100% guarantee they would never have anybody do that.
No, no. And then the last one I thought of was West Side Story, which was basically an Americanized, modernized Romeo and Juliet. I've seen both film adaptations, liked those, though honestly, the more recent Spielberg one I thought was even better, and was pretty bummed that it didn't win Best Picture. I'll say that's all I'll say about that. But then, there's some pretty dark racial subject matter, and of course gun violence. But there are definitely some themes of racial tension and love defying barriers. I think that is very powerful and relevant for our day.
For
And
sure.
I think so. Overall, I think the story itself has a good message in and of itself. But I feel like maybe, with the stuff I've talked about with the guns and stuff, it would probably be a bit much for our program.
Oh yeah, and I mean it ends with
Yeah,
a fight scene, like a fatal
yeah,
fight scene.
right.
Um so yeah, I feel like maybe there could be a way to work around some of that stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd probably lose some of the stinging power, and I don't know if I don't know if the whole cautionary stuff would sink in as powerfully if they tone that down. So
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about.
probably best we avoided it.
Right. I will say though, it does have the good music, it definitely has a good story. The choreography in that production is absolutely phenomenal, regardless of which version you see. And I personally would love to be in some of that choreography myself. It's kind of like Newsies in a way, where there's a lot of like jumping and spinning, a lot of energy. And that's the kind of choreography I'd love to try more of in the future. Um, and I know you brought up briefly the different movies that are out there, like the one that came out a while ago and the remake. I will say this, getting slightly off topic here, but I do want to say for those that haven't seen it, the remake of West Side Story, I wasn't sure what I was going to think of it going in because a lot of times remakes are not seen as good as the original, but this one was really solid. This one was good.
Yeah, it was, I believe so.
Yeah, I remember seeing it in theaters, and I know at the time my mom was hesitant to see it because she loved the original so much, and I didn't blame her at all for being skeptical about the remake. But even now, I still want to recommend it to her.
Yeah. Yeah. I recommend it too. Yeah, and I think it has a lot of people would probably agree with us.
I would definitely say so.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up. And so, as always, be sure to take advantage of our platforms, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whatever. It's all in the intro.
Mhm.
And, take advantage of our direct messaging and comments and, you know, whatever you have to say, I'm sure is more than welcome.
Oh, absolutely. We love the comments. We love questions. We love suggestions, maybe for future episodes, or if you just want to know what our thoughts are on something that may have happened recently. Uh, any interaction with you guys is absolutely welcomed. And if you have a great idea, not only might we use it in the future, but you might even get a shout out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for streaming and we'll see you again soon.
See you next time.